Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, the seventh stage. Well, the time finally came when the pilgrims had to be on their way, and so they prepared for their journey. Before they left, they sent for their friends, talked with them, and trusted each one to the protection of their prince. Those who were able brought items with them, things from their own possessions that were suitable for the weak and the strong, for the women and the men. In this way, they equipped the pilgrims with the things necessary for their journey. When it came time to leave, they set out and their friends accompanied them for as far as was convenient. Before they said goodbye, they once again committed each other to the protection of their king and then parted ways. In this manner, the small group of pilgrims went on with Greatheart leading the way. Now the women and children had little physical strength, but pressed on the best they could. Mr. Ready to Halt and Mr. Feeble-Mind could sympathize with their condition. Shortly after they were away from the townspeople and their friends, they came to the place where Faithful had been put to death. They stood there and gave thanks to him who enabled him to bear his cross so well, and in addition, they were thankful for how they had benefited from his suffering and example. From there, they went on. As they walked along, they talked about Christian and Faithful, and how Hopeful joined himself to Christian after that Faithful was dead. Now they came up to the hill Lucre, where the silver mine stood, which lured Demas from his pilgrimage. It was the same mine into which some think Bians fell and perished. The pilgrims recalled these stories and considered all that had happened. When they came to the old pillar of salt monument that stood against the hill Lucre, they stood and looked out at the view of Sodom and its stinking lake. There they marveled, just like Christian did, when he stood in that same place, thinking about how men of such knowledge and maturity could be so blinded by their own greed as to turn aside here. But as they thought more about it, they understood that nature is often not influenced by the harm others experience, especially when the thing they are looking at is alluring to one with a foolish eye. They went on until they reached the river that rests on this side of the Delectable Mountains. Fine trees lined the banks of this river, and when the leaves of these trees were eaten, they helped prevent gluttony. Here the meadows remained green all year long, and the pilgrims could lie down safely. By this riverside, in the meadows, there were sheepfolds for sheep, and a house built for the nourishing and raising of those lambs, the babes of women who go on pilgrimage. Also, one was here who was entrusted with them, who had compassion, and in his arm he will gather the lambs and carry them in his bosom. He will gently lead the nursing ewes. Now Christiana advised her 4 daughters to place their little ones in the care of this man, so they might be housed, refreshed, assisted, and nourished by these waters, and so none of them would lack in the future. If any of them went astray or were lost, this man would bring them back again. He would also bind up their wounds and strengthen them when sick. Here they would never lack food, drink, or clothing. They were kept safe from thieves and robbers, and this man would die before he allowed one of those in his trust to be lost. Besides, here they were guaranteed good instruction and counseling, and they would be taught to walk in right paths, and that, you know, is no insignificant kindness. Also, here they enjoyed clear waters, pleasant meadows, dainty flowers, and a variety of trees bearing healthy fruit, not fruit like Matthew ate, which fell over the wall from Beelzebub's garden. This fruit brings about health where there is none, health that continues and increases as long as the fruit is there. So they were happy to commit their little ones into his care. In fact, it was an encouragement to do so, for all of this was under the charge of the king, and there would be no place more hospitable to young children and orphans. Now they went on and came to Bypath Meadow. They arrived at the stile which Christian crossed over with his fellow traveler, Hopeful. It was here those 2 pilgrims were taken by Giant Despair and put into Doubting Castle. Here the group of pilgrims sat down and talked together about what had happened to Christian and Hopeful here, and what was best for them to do now. For they wondered if now that they were so strong and had such great heart as their guide, if perhaps it would be best to make an attempt on the giant and to demolish his castle. They also thought that if there were any pilgrims being held in the castle, this could be an opportunity to set them free before they journeyed further. As they talked, one said one thing and another said the opposite. One questioned if it was lawful to step upon unconsecrated ground. Another said it might be permitted as long as the end result was good. But Greatheart said, "Though that last claim cannot be true in every case, I do have a commandment to resist sin, to overcome evil, and to fight the good fight of faith. I have to ask, with whom should I fight this good fight, if not with Giant Despair? I will therefore attempt to take his life and to demolish Doubting Castle." Then he asked, "Who will go with me?" Old Honest said, "I will, and so will we, Christiana's 4 sons. Matthew, Samuel, Joseph, and James said, for they were now young men and strong. So they left the women at the road, along with them Mr. Feeblemind and Mr. Ready to Halt with his crutches. The men were meant to guard the women until the others returned, since the Giant Despair lived so near. The plan was for them to stay in the road, for then even a little child could lead them. Mr. Greatheart, Old Honest, and the 4 young men headed up to Doubting Castle to look for Giant Despair. When they arrived at the castle gate, they knocked for entrance with a most uncommon noise. At that, the old giant came to the gate, and Diffidence, his wife, followed. The giant called out, "Who and what is he who is so brave as to come to my gate and bother the Giant Despair in this manner?" Greatheart replied, "It is I, Greatheart, one of the king of the celestial country's guides to pilgrims. I conduct them to their place, and I demand that you open your gates and let me in. Prepare yourself to fight, for I have come to take off your head and to demolish Doubting Castle." Now Giant Despair, because he was a giant, thought that no man could overcome him. So he reasoned that since in times past he had conquered angels, why should he be afraid of this man, Greatheart? So he equipped himself with armor and went out to meet Greatheart. He wore a cap of steel on his head, a breastplate of fire, and shoes made of iron. In his hand he held a great club. The 6 men drew up to him and surrounded him in front and behind. When Diffidence, the giantess, came to help her husband, old Mr. Honest cut her down with one blow. Then the fight grew fierce, and they fought for their lives. Giant Despair was brought down to the ground, but was very reluctant to die. He struggled hard, and seemed to have, as they say, as many lives as a cat. Finally, Greatheart killed him, but didn't leave until he had severed his head from his shoulders and buried his body under a great pile of stones. Since Giant Despair was dead, they started demolishing Doubting Castle. It took them 7 days to bring it down, and in the process they found 2 pilgrims alive inside, a Mr. Despondency, who was almost starved to death, and his daughter, Much Afraid. But it would have made you wonder to have seen all the dead bodies scattered here and there in the castle yard, and how full the dungeon was of dead men's bones. When Greatheart and his companions had performed this heroic act, they took Mr. Despondency and his daughter Much Afraid into their protection, for they were honest people who had been imprisoned in Doubting Castle by that tyrant Giant Despair. They took the head of the giant with them to the road and showed it to their companions, who waited for them there and told them what they had done. Now when Feeblemind and Ready to Halt saw that it was really the head of Giant Despair, they were lively and merry. Now Christiana, if needed, could play upon the viol, and her daughter Mercy the lute. So since everyone was so happy, they played them a song, and Ready to Halt danced. He took Despondency's daughter, Much Afraid, by the hand and danced with her in the road. True, he could not dance without using one crutch, but I promise you, He handled his footwork well, and the girl was to be commended, for she kept time to the music handsomely. As for Mr. Despondency, he wasn't as interested in the music. He cared more about eating than dancing, because he was almost starved while held captive in the castle. So Christiana gave him some of her bottle of spirits to help him feel better immediately, and then she prepared him something to eat. In a short time, the old gentleman became more himself and revived. Now I saw in my dream, when all these things had taken place, that Greatheart took the head of Giant Despair and set it upon a pole by the side of the highway. He placed it right against the pillar, which Christian had erected for a warning to other pilgrims who would come after him when entering into the giant's grounds. Beneath it, he wrote upon a marble stone these verses: "This is the head of him whose name only in former times terrified pilgrims. His castles torn down, and Diffidence, his wife, brave Mr. Hart, has deprived of life. Despondency and his daughter much afraid, Greatheart for them also the man has played. Whoever doubts this, if he'll just cast his eye up here, may his doubts and questions satisfy. This head also, when doubting cripples dance, does show from fears they have deliverance." When these men had bravely proven themselves against Doubting Castle and had slain Giant Despair, they continued on their journey until they came to the Delectable Mountains, where Christian and Hopeful refreshed themselves with the beautiful woods, vineyards, fruits of all sorts, as well as flowers of the place. They also became acquainted with the shepherds there, who welcomed them to the Delectable Mountains in the same way they had welcomed Christian before. Now the shepherds were well acquainted with Greatheart, and when they saw him leading such a large group of people, they said to him, "Good sir, you have a good-sized group here. Where did you find all these people?" Greatheart replied, "First, there is Christiana and her train, her sons and her sons' wives, who, like the wain, keep by the pole and do by compass steer, from sin to grace, else they had not been here. Next, here's Old Honest, come on pilgrimage, ready to halt too, when I dare engage. True-hearted is, and so is Feeble Mind, who willing was not to be left behind. Despondency, good man, is coming after, and so also is Much Afraid, his daughter. May we have entertainment here, or must we further go? Let's know whereon to trust." The shepherd said, "We are comfortable with this group. You are welcome to stay with us, for we have accommodations for the feeble as well as for the strong. Our prince pays attention to what is done to the least of these. Therefore, frailty and sickness must not be a hindrance to our hospitality." So they ushered them to the palace door and said, "Come in, Mr. Feeble Mind. Come in, Mr. Ready to Halt. Come in, Mr. Despondency and Mrs. Much Afraid, his daughter. These, Mr. Greatheart, said to the shepherds to the guide, we call in by name, for they are most likely to draw back. But as for you and the rest of the group who are strong, we leave you to your usual liberty." Greatheart said, "This day I see that grace shines in your faces, and that you are truly my Lord's shepherds. For you have not pushed the infirm or diseased with your side or shoulder, but instead have scattered flowers on the path at their feet, as you should." So the feeble and weak went into the palace, and Greatheart and the rest followed. When they were inside and seated, the shepherd said to those of the weaker sort, "What is it that you would like to have?" For the shepherd said all things must be managed to support the weak as well as to warn the unruly. So they made them a feast of easily digested foods that were tasty and nourishing. After they had eaten, they went to lie down, with each one going to their respective and proper place. When morning came, the day was clear. There, high in the mountains, as was the custom of the shepherds, they planned to show the pilgrims some rare and uncommon things before their departure. After the pilgrims had refreshed themselves and were ready, the shepherds took them out into the fields and first showed them what they had shown to Christian when he was there. Then they led them to some new places. The first was Mount Marvel. From here they saw a man in the distance who disturbed the quiet of the hills with words. The pilgrims turned to the shepherds and asked, "What does this mean?" The shepherds told them, "That man is the son of one Mr. Greatgrace. He is the same man whom you read about in the first part of the records of the Pilgrim's Progress. He teaches pilgrims how to believe down to their core and how to turn one way or the other as they meet difficulties by faith." Then Greatheart said, "I know him. He is a man above many." Then the shepherds brought them to another place called Mount Innocence. Here they saw a man clothed all in white, along with two men by the names of Prejudice and Ill Will. These two men continually threw dirt upon the man in white. Now whatever dirt they threw at him would just fall off again. After a short time, and his garment would look as clean and white as if no dirt had ever touched it. The pilgrims asked, "What means this?" The shepherds answered, "This man is named Godly Man, and this white garment shows the innocence of his life. Now those who throw dirt at him are men who hate his good conduct. But as you see, the dirt will not stick on his clothes. This is how it shall be with those who lived innocently in the world. Whoever tries to make such men dirty, labor in vain. For when such men spend a little time with God, their innocence shall shine forth like light, and their righteousness as bright as the sun at noon." Then they took them to Mount Charity, where they showed them a man who had a bundle of cloth lying before him. Out of this cloth he cut coats and other garments for the poor who stood around him. Yet his bundle and roll of cloth never became any less. "What does this mean?" the pilgrims asked. "This is to show you that one who has a heart to give of his labor to the poor shall never lack. He who waters shall himself be watered, and the cake that the widow gave to the prophet did not result in any less in her barrel." The shepherds then escorted them to the place where they saw one fool and one wit washing an Ethiopian with dark skin with the intention of making him white. But the more they washed him, the blacker he became. Again they asked the shepherds the meaning of what they saw. The shepherds said, "This is an example of how it is with the vile person who uses all means in their own strength to get a good name. In the end, all their effort only results in making them more abominable. This is how it was with the Pharisees, and this is also how it shall be with all hypocrites." Then Mercy, the wife of Matthew, said to Christiana, "Mother, if possible, I would like to see the hole in the hill that is commonly called the byway to hell." So her mother revealed her thought to the shepherds, and so they went to the door on the side of a hill, opened it, and told Mercy to listen for a while. So she listened and heard one saying, "Cursed be my father, for holding me back from the way of peace and life." Another said, "Oh, if only I had been torn in pieces before I had lost my soul to save my life." And another said, "If I were to live again, how would I deny myself rather than to end up living in this place?" Then a noise emanated from the door as if the very earth groaned and quaked under Mercy's feet. The color drained from her face, and she walked away trembling and said, "Blessed are they who are delivered from this place." Now when the shepherds had shown them all these things, they took them back to the palace and showed them hospitality, with all the house had to offer. But Mercy, being a young married woman, longed for something she saw there, but was ashamed to ask for it. Christiana could tell something was bothering her and asked her what troubled her, because she didn't look well. Mercy said, "There is a looking glass which hangs in the dining room." She glanced at her mother-in-law and back at the floor. "I can't stop thinking about it. I feel that if I don't have it, I shall miscarry." Christiana said, "I will mention your desire for the mirror to the shepherds, and they will not deny you your desire." Mercy let out a deep sigh. "I am ashamed to admit to these men that I longed for it in such a way." "No, my daughter, don't feel that way. There is no shame in such longing, for it is a virtue to long for such a thing as that." "If that is the case," Mercy said, "then, Mother, if you are willing, please ask the shepherds if they are willing to sell it." Now the looking glass was one of 1,000. It had the special ability to reflect a man with his own features exactly, but when it was turned another way, it showed one the very face and likeness of the Prince of Pilgrims himself. I have talked with those who have seen it firsthand, and they have said they have seen the very crown of thorns upon his head when looking in that mirror. They have also seen the holes in his hands, his feet, and his side. And this mirror has an outstanding feature that reveals him to anyone who has a mind to see him, whether living or dead, on earth or in heaven, in a state of humiliation or in exaltation, or whether they come to suffer or to reign. Christiana went to the shepherds alone. Now the names of the shepherds were Knowledge, Experience, Watchful, and Sincere. And she said, "One of my daughters who is pregnant longs for something that she has seen in this house, and she thinks that if she is denied by you, that she shall miscarry." Experience said, Call her now, for she shall assuredly have what we can offer her." So they called her and said, "Mercy, what is the thing you long to have from the house?" She blushed, but said, "The large looking glass that hangs in the dining room." Without a word, Sincere ran to get it and brought it back, and it was given to her with much joy. Mercy bowed her head, gave thanks, and said, "By this I know that I have obtained approval in your sight." They also gave to the other young women the things they desired, and to their husbands great praise, for they had joined Greatheart in the slaying of giant Despair and the demolishing of Doubting Castle. The shepherds hung a necklace around Christiana's neck and did the same with her 4 daughters. They also placed earrings in their ears and jewels on their foreheads. When they were ready to go from the house, the shepherds let them go in peace, without issuing the same warnings which they had given Christian and his companion when they were there. For these pilgrims had Greatheart as their guide, and he was well acquainted with things and could offer them warnings in a timely fashion when the danger was near or approaching. For the warnings of Christian and his companion had received from the shepherds had been forgotten by the time they needed to put them into practice. Therefore, this group of pilgrims had an advantage over them in this way. From there they went on their way, singing these words, "Behold how suitably the stages are set for pilgrims to find relief when they enter, and how they receive us without hindrance, who make the other life our target and residence. What new things they have to us they give, that we, though pilgrims, joyful lives may live. They do upon us too such things bestow, that show we are pilgrims wherever we go." The end of stage 7. Next week, the 8th stage. Thanks so much for listening.